talking tonight about Kabballah and Astrology. People have already asked what's the connection. There's a lot of connection, because what is the idea of the Kabbalah? That different deeper forces in the world are really, I wouldn't say controlling us, and we'll get into that, because of course we do have free choice, but certain things we don't have free choice. Certain things, the way we're born, you don't get to pick out, hey, I'd like to be smart. You know, I'd like to be a genius like Albert Einstein. Well, you're born with a certain IQ. Of course, you can make yourself smarter, but ultimately, you know, you can't just make yourself an Albert Einstein. Hey, I'd like to be rich. Everybody, who doesn't want to be rich? You know, but sometimes people make it and some people don't. And on, you know, hey, I'd like to be beautiful movie star, and you're born with your looks. So certain things, of course, you are born with, and you don't have any free choice. Of course, we'll get into that, and that's where a lot of the Kabbalah comes in, and actually astrology comes into that for us also, because you're born under certain stars. And actually it's very interesting, because I know even when I went to Hebrew school, they would say astrology, that's not Jewish. You know, you see the horoscopes, if you're under this Leo or under this constellation, don't look at that. That's not a Jewish thing. Jews don't believe in that. Well, the truth of the matter is, it's not 100% correct. On one hand, there are influences that we do have, and they're under the mazolos, that's the Hebrew word for constellations. And on the other hand, the Hebrew school teacher was right. There's certain things that we go beyond them. One of the ideas, of course, in the Hebrew schools that they, of course, are always teaching is everybody learns, and it's actually apropos because Passover, Pesach is coming up in just a few short weeks, and that Moshe confronts Pharaoh, and he says, I can do certain, and you don't want to say tricks, because in holiness they're not, I can do certain miracles for you. I can turn this water into blood, and he pours a pitcher of blood. And Pharaoh is not at all impressed. It's just even the basic story. Calls over his astrologers. He says, you know, you think I'm impressed with that? Listen, these guys could do it too. And they, in turn, actually do the trick. For them, it was a trick, the idea of magic. And they are called astrologers, and they did know the signs, and they could manipulate the world. Of course, in holiness and Torah, we do believe in miracles. Again, that is the Passover story, that God changed the Nile River to blood, and on. We know the basic story. And of course, through the Bible, so many miracles, and God says, I can interfere with nature. But there are very, very strong powers of nature, and they can be manipulated if people do know the way to manipulate them. And Pharaoh, and the perfect example is Pharaoh and his astrologers. They knew how to manipulate the nature. Of course, where this is really the brunt of it, there are natural tendencies, but the way you use them is up to you, and that is where the free choice comes in, where astrologers and Pharaoh didn't understand that idea. Going into a little bit of Kabbalah, because we're trying to integrate the astrology with the Kabbalah, there are actually, you know, you say, well, there's God and, you know, Hashem. But truth, when you get in Kabbalah, and we see it in the Siddur, if you notice that there's 10 different names for God, for Hashem. The main ones are Avaya, I don't want to say their name out, or Elohim. These are the two major ones you see, but there are actually 10 different names. And each name has a different connotation. 10 names, you can parallel that. There's 10 spheros, 10 emanations, that each one has a different trait. Now, Hashem will concentrate his energy into any one of those 10, and that's the way we perceive him. There's not 10 gods, it's one God into 10 different emanations. And for example, as you see that Hashem said, I'm a warrior, I'm beating up the Egyptians when they got out of Egypt, and then when he appears at Mount Sinai, he's a sage. And Kabbalah will give an example, try to understand this a little better. is that you have clear water. What color is the water? You say it's clear. There's no color to water. It's just clear liquid. On the other hand, we don't have if you have a green cup, you know, some of you buy in the dollar store a green cup, it looks, and you look inside, you don't know if you're drinking ginger ale or is it water. It looks like the water is green. You know, if it's a red cup, it's the same idea. So to the perceiver, the way we look at it, maybe green, maybe it's red, but it's still water. Water didn't change from, it's not green water or red water, the way you look at the cup. You know, what are you giving me, ginger ale or water? It looks green. And to the water, it's still clear. And that's a good example of how to perceive Hashem in these 10 spheros, because he may look different at different times, and in truth he is different to us, but he's still the one Hashem. And that's going to be a very, very important idea in Kabbalah, and that's very basic when you learn the Kabbalah. You get into all these spheros, and we'll talk a little bit more about them, and emanations, but then you get into it, you get so bogged down to it, it seems like there's 10 gods. You know, how many gods are there? There's a god of this. It's almost like Greek mythology. A god of war and a god of love. And of course, it's totally non-Jewish. What is the difference then? It would be that it's one Hashem emanating into different spheros, into different emanations, where Greek mythology said there are separate, different entities, and that's where the problem lies, because even non-Jews are not supposed to believe in avodah zarah or idol worship. They have to also believe there's one God, and right now, that's a subject in its own right, but not for now, not for this time. In any case, that we do see that, for example, and I'm a little bit more concentrating, can't say about everything in the time that we have, but that we're concentrating on Passover because it is coming up Passover, so maybe it'll make your ideas of Passover a little bit deeper. That one of the ideas is just that Pharaoh said, you want to leave Egypt, Moshe, but I see Ra, I see it's bad. And what he saw was the Ra is actually a name of their idol. It's very interesting. It's a play on words. It really means bad, but it's one of their idols. And he sees that, I see my idol star is over your heads. And again, with Greek mythology, and I'm going to have to explain that also, and I know that when you teach, even adults, but the little Hebrew school kids, you teach them about Abraham, and you say, well, they made a statue and they bowed down to him. How stupid even a little kid laughs at it, how ridiculous they are. And that's the way you think, they believe in this guy, Greek mythology, how ridiculous, how stupid, how ancient. They didn't have a computer, so they're not as intelligent as we are. But it's really a wrong idea, because on one hand it is incorrect, and all right, so their Greek mythology is wrong, but they surely were not stupid, and you're going to lose a lot, because that's one thing. It's like the Hebrew school teacher, there's no such thing as astrology, and there really is. It's too naive. It's really incorrect. And to think that the Egyptians and the Greeks were stupid, on one hand you could say, they were wrong, but they weren't stupid, and you're going to lose a lot if you think that way, and you have to understand what they were thinking about, but then we'll understand the superiority of the monotheism of Judaism. So the Greek mythology also understood there were powers in the world, and that actually is very interesting. Pharaoh also had these powers with him, and there's an interesting medrash, and it says that Pharaoh says to Moses, well, who sent you to me? And again, you have to remember, you're 3,300 years ago, and again, maybe we don't learn Egyptian mythology, but maybe in school we're more familiar with Greek mythology. Zeus, everybody heard of him, and all these different gods. And in the olden time, I'm talking over 2,000 years ago, they understand there was a Greek god and a Roman god and a Jewish god. They just felt that my God could beat up your God. That's the way, because there was just many different idols. It really was Judaism that was monotheistic, and because it's 2,000 years later since Christianity, and now Islam come onto the scene, So now everybody believes in a universal God. Unfortunately, not to get into that subject, but that's why there's so many wars, because saying, well, be a Muslim in the Arab countries, who's stopping you? No one's bothering you. But since the Judaism brought out there's a universal God, so he's not just an Arab God, he's a universal God, and everybody on the face of the earth has to believe in our God. It's why a lot of Christians in Crusades, they couldn't leave anybody alone, because in their mythology, that really in a certain sense, and that's the subject in some right to Christianity, is mythology. They learned from Judaism, it's not your God, my God, the Christian gods, the European gods, the Arab gods, it's a universal God. But that's very, very Jewish, because compared to Greek mythology, there are certain different gods. And the Egyptians, of course, believe that also. Our God can beat up your God. So he says, who's God? You mean who's God? You don't say that. A firm believer, believes, hey, Christian God is the only God, or Jewish says, well, who's your God? You don't say who's your God. There's one God over everybody. You don't say who's your God and who's this God. And that's why you have to understand the Egyptian ideas here. So who's your God? And he said Havaya, which Havaya is in Hebrew, it stands for Hoya, Hova, Vayia, past, present, and future. He was, he is, and he will be, and it's contained all in one word, meaning that the true Hashem is above all limitations. He's surely above time, he's above place, and you can see that even in his name. Names show on things. We're going to get to even more specific ideas of later ideas with different names. But he asked him, he says, Havaya, and he looked, it says in the Medrash, he looked in his book of gods. He understood their powers in this world. There are different, it's not just who's got the bigger army. I mean, nowadays that's what you believe. Well, we got these many planes, and you have this many nuclear weapons, so we're tougher than you. So they understood you needed chariots and horses, but there were also inexplicable gods or their powers in the world. So it's not just so simple that we have many chariots. Our God is so strong that even with a few chariots, and the truth is that's a very Jewish idea. I mean, we say it all the time in Psalms. The Rakavel Basusim, these people believe in horses and chariots, and even if you have superior forces, God is going to help us. And we saw in the 6-Day War in Israel, they were outmanned and they had more material, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win. And we see that many times in history. So there's other forces that we can't explain that's going to be the determination of victory. In any case, that Pharaoh didn't understand it. So what happened according to Kabbalah is that he did understand the name of Elohim. He knew the Jewish God of Elohim. It wasn't like, who's you Jews? Who are you guys? What do you believe in? He understood that there's a name of Elohim, and Elohim in Hebrew is a different decoding. That's what I'm saying. Again, a lot of times, and I always say this, the English, you can get a decent translation, but really to decode the secrets, you have to know the Hebrew. Because we just said before, with the different names of God, you could just say God, and it's very, very simplistic because there's 10 names of God, and you'll never get the nuance of different names of God. So again, one of the ways of decoding Hebrew is the gematria, numerical value. The numerical value of Elohim is Hateva, which is nature. And that is the force. I mean, there are forces in this world, and we're getting back to the astrology, really. It's not like this world is nothing, is chopped liver. I mean, it's a powerful world. It's a beautiful world, and Torah and Judaism does recognize it because it's the truth. You can't get away from it. I mean, you can't just say the world is nothing and only God exists. There is a world around us. So they knew the name of Elohim, but that's nature. And naturally, the Jewish people were slaves. He says, well, that's it. You guys are locked up. And that's the way it is. You lost the ball game because, according to nature, the Jewish people are a minority. They were oppressed in Egypt. And we're tough, and the Egyptian empire is very strong. And you guys aren't getting out. So just keep quiet and just go back to work, because that's the way it is. And the news of the idea of Moses says, well, there is Havaya, just because you don't know him, it doesn't make a difference that he doesn't exist. And again, a very beautiful example in the Medrash, So as a Kohen, you have to understand that if someone is a Kohen shouldn't be in a cemetery, because the Kohen is pure, he's on a holier level, and the cemetery is impure. So the Medrash, it's an example, it's not a real story, that the person was looking for a Kohen, he was lost, and he says, well, maybe I'm going to look in the cemetery. Someone came over to him, you fool, you're looking all over the place, you're never going to find them. You're looking among dead people. The Kohen can't be here. You're just looking around where it's impossible to be. And he says, you're looking in a book of dead things, the name of God, and who knows what he was looking at, but it doesn't get into, but all the different idols of the world. And you're not going to find, you expect to find a live God, Elohim Chaim, a true God, in a book of dead. You're not going to find them. You're looking in the wrong places. So this was news. It's not only, I want to bring this out to you, it's not just an ancient story of the Pharaoh, but it's in the Bible, and we say it, of course, on Passover, universal, not just to give the matzah business, the factory's extra business, but it's in order for us to relive it. And of course, that we have the idea of pharaohs and oppressors could be a lot of different things. But people say, well, there you have this attitude, that's the way it is. I can't help it. Very existential philosophy. It's not at all Jewish. That's what they're trying to teach you in the Passover story. There's forces above nature. Now, I just want to bring out a little bit more because, I'm bringing out the Passover story, and we just had Purim. Just give you tidbits of different holidays, and then going back into the Chumash where you see these forces of nature taking over. Again, you have Haman. Again, it's sometimes in the coloring books, if you see, it's a kid's holiday, but really it isn't for everybody. That's what we're going to get into, the deeper ideas of what Purim is all about. So again, that they make like Haman, this evil Shmendrik over here, he looks like a Shmo, and I'm going to kill the Jews. And he's some idiot, anti-Semite, doesn't have any brains in his head, that just some boozer, that wants to kill the Jews. Again, it's not only simplistic, it's wrong. He wasn't stupid. Yes, he was evil. Doesn't mean he's stupid, because the two things are not as separate. Just you could be evil and very, very smart, and many people are, including this Haman. And that's why I'm saying Pharaoh also. You make they make him like a bad guy. He is a bad guy, just wants to kill the Jews. But these people were very intelligent, and that's why they had so much power. In any case, Haman understood the stars. We're trying to connect Kabballah and astrology, and he threw down lots. And the idea was behind the lots was very, very deep in its own set. Because if you want to make a date, you want to start a business, or you want to you make a wedding or whatever, let's throw down some dice and figure out. Who does that? It sounds like a fool. Or, that's how you determine a good date for something. You have a special, once to wipe out let's throw down some dice. So it's sounds like a fool. But he wasn't fool at all. Because it is very, very deep, that he wanted to pull from forces higher than nature. He understood that, just like we said in the Pharaoh story, even though the Egyptian story, we have Passover after Purim, but historically, it came over 1,000 years beforehand. So he knew the Egypt story, and he says there's something with these Jews that they are, some say, so to speak, that they're always on top. So in a normal idea of things, that the Jewish people are the chosen people, and he knew that there's something special behind them. So what Haman tried to do is go above the stars. He understood that. He tried to manipulate the system. These people are very, very deep. There are forces in nature. We do pray, and these are ideas that we go beyond Hashem, try to connect ourselves to Hashem and go beyond the forces of nature. Like, who will win the lottery? Now, if you say who gets to be the secretary of the governor, you'd think there's got to be or some administrator. Then you find out that the husband gave a big donation to the governor's, whatever. You see there's a lot of protexia in a lot of jobs. But on the other hand, who gets to win the New York State lottery? Does the governor's son get a better chance than the welfare person? Well, many times you do see people on welfare winning the money. There's no one saying, hey, the guy on welfare is usually the low guy in the totem pole, but they have a total equal chance to the governor to win the New York State lottery. So what is a lottery? Everybody is equal. Doesn't make a difference who you are, what you are, and position you are. So that's what that Haman was trying to do, not just playing games like a fool to throw down some dice and figure out what it was. But it's very, very interesting that he wanted to go above nature into the lottery where everybody is equal. And when it fell down in the month of Adar, he was very, very happy. And that's, again, here's the idea of astrology, because that the Jewish people go according to the lunar months, and even though that the constellations go up against the solar calendar, but again, that there are solar influences in Jewish also. So I'm saying it's not like, oh, we don't hold by the stars because that's the solar, we don't hold by the seasons. It's not true. That Jewish incorporates everything, the lunar year and the solar year, together. And therefore, that these influences of the stars were important to people like Haman and to Pharaoh. And it's very, very interesting if you know that the month or the constellation that of Passover, which is Nisan, and that is the Aries, which is the ram or the sheep. And what was the sacrifice for the Jewish people, what they sacrificed? So it was the sheep. So again, everything has a very deep significance. Well, take a cow. What do you have to take? A sheep? Take a cow. Doesn't make a difference. So he says, again, Torah was very exact in that. So he wanted to show, again, and this is a very important point also, when you learn in the Torah, it wasn't just to wipe out people. It's not a Jewish concept. Just, oh, they're mean, let's wipe them out. It's not Jewish. It's a very non-Jewish concept. But what rather is just that you have a wrong idea. Again, you think this mythology and this God and that God. And what Jewish, and what Hashem really wants is that they should learn their lesson. There is one God in the world. Not like, oh, you're evil, we'll wipe you out, and they have nothing to do with you. So one of the ideas he wanted to bring out to them is that this is their God. This sheep is going to help us. And then when the Jewish people took the sheep and sacrificed them as a Paschal lamb, then that proved to them that their sheep had no power. He wanted to make that go in through their thick heads that there wasn't anything like mythology. There's a higher power in the world than there are different idols. And one of them is the sheep. So specifically, that's why in the constellation of the sheep, he told them, because that should be their mazel. Hey, this is our thing. This is where we stand strong. So he wanted to show them, maybe it's your constellation, your mazel, and your sheep. We're going to take that, in that month, we're going to take a sheep, and we're going to slaughter it to God, just to show you these things have no power for themselves. They do have powers again, but nothing compared to Hashem, and that's a very important point. That really and now go back to the Bible, you have the idea with Abraham. Abraham was 100 years old, Sarah is 90 years old, and they didn't have any children. Well, at one point you got to give up already. Old is old. And so when God says, Hashem tells them you're going to have progeny, you're going to have children, they really laughed. It's impossible. It's ridiculous. And he says, don't. So he says, there's a basic interpretation, and then I'm going to tell you the deeper interpretation. The basic interpretation says, Hashem says, come outside. Would you please go outside? Look at the stars. Yeah, you see the stars? Your children will be as numerous as the stars. That's your blessing. Because you think you can't have children, and ultimately, and I never saw a number, but for over 3,000 years, how many Jewish people were living? By 1 billion, like that. Throughout the years. There's never such a number, but in any case, as numerous as the stars. All right, so that's the basic idea. The deeper interpretation is you go out and see those stars, because, again, it's very, very deep. But Abraham also knew, astrology. It's not like, oh, one God and everything else is baloney as we started to talk. He knew the star system also. And that's what he was telling Shem. I know the system, and I cannot have any kids. So it's a strong influence, you should know. But what Hashem even told Avraham at the beginning, I'm taking beyond the stars. I want to show you that I can do whatever that I need to do. I'm not limited, even though Hashem made the creation. He's not fighting the creation, which is more of a Catholic idea. The devil, he's in charge of everything. I made the system, but I can go beyond the system also. And I can take you above the stars. Outside the stars, could also go outside to the stars. I can get you outside, like above the stars. And then that's what anything could happen. He taught that really originally to Abraham, to the first Jewish person. That was the lesson that he needed to be taught. And again, really it's a lesson for all of us to be taught, of course, that there are forces of nature, but on the other hand, that we can be above the nature. Now, I want to take you a little bit more through the Chumash, and I can't take you to everything, but just even few examples. Now, when you get to there's Abraham, for people who know, Isaac, Jacob, so it's one Jewish person, 111, and after Jacob, there are 12 sons. How many Mazolos constellations are there? 12, and this is not just haphazard, 12 here, 12 there. So this is very, very interesting that each one represented a different constellation. And where do you even see that is just that you see that with the blessings. Again, when you get blessing, oh, you should be good and you should be smart and you'll be a good plumber, just throwing out a bunch of different words that you see in the different mazolos. And just to have a few quotes here, that because again, go not through all 12 of them, but you should. I mean, it'd be interesting that you see with Ruvain. I just wanted to tell you about Ruvain first. Ruvain has the Taurus and the ox, and this is the words of Yaakov, the words of Jacob and his blessing. So again, everything is very deep. You just throw, okay, blessing here, blessing there, but they're very, very significant. And he just to go through Ruvain, he says, ways for dignity and strength, and these are the, this is really, if you see the influences of these constellations, they are predicted inside or explained in these 12 blessings to them and strength because of the animal. Each one of them is very, very interesting. That many of the tribes are blessed with non-Jewish animals. Like Benjamin's the wolf, Yehuda's the lion. That's why you see a lion on the prochus, on the curtain of a Sefer Torah. You see, oh, these nine is not kosher. You would think only kosher animals should be there, but it's not true because you read it. And it's not that, again, it's very, very interesting Kabbalistically that everything has its source in Kedusha. Everything comes from Hashem. So even though that we're told you can't eat a wolf, it's a non-kosher animal, and Benjamin's symbolized by a wolf, but a wolf, ultimately, there are special traits to it. Everything is part of the creation, and everything's part of Hashem. So everything, even evil, not that these wolves are evil, but anything in the world that maybe not the kosher, the Jewish thing, have a source in Kedusha and holiness. And that's also with the 12 zodiacs, like for example, the lion and in the summertime, that they have these different sources of Kedusha. And again, Kabbalistically, they're sourced in the Ezekiel's chariot. There was 4 animals and man on the chariot, and there was the lion. There is the source of the non-kosher animals. So everything has its source in holiness. Everything has its place. Doesn't mean you can eat everything, but doesn't mean everything is evil also. You don't eat a horse, but you can ride a horse, and you can use the horse for different animals, has its place. Everything part of the creation has a source, and you do see it in the zodiac symbols that everything is very, very special. And I just, you see this also in Joseph's dreams. Remember his dreams, the sun and the moon and the stars were subservient. And again, that's really, that's a very, very Jewish form of understanding that the stars are subservient to the Jewish person. And I'll give you again one example where I started saying it, that people are influenced by their zodiac symbol, but then I said what the Jewish view is just that you can be above it, you can change it. One of the major ideas we always know, Mars, people know and understand it, it's the red planet, and therefore, and again, this is almost like natural that people understand it, red is blood. And so, this is really from the Talmud. I mean, they understand this, that someone who's born under influence of Mars will be a bloody person. But then, that doesn't mean that you don't have free choice. Of course, we do believe that every person has free choice. So if a person is evil, they'll become a murderer. They love killing people. You know, they just see the sight of blood, or boxers, you know, someone who likes killing. On the other hand, you could use that for holiness, that it says either you become like a doctor or a surgeon who are cutting people up and seeing blood every day, but they're doing good service. They're not evil people. They're doing good service to humanity, or a sheikhet, they're slaughtering animals. Again, that's a very, you see a bracha before, it's a very holy service, and you know, even though you're shacking chickens and, you know, blood's all over the place. So therefore you could use your influence in a holy way or in a non-holy way also. And there's also, again, I mean, again, that's a general theme of Judaism, but again, just to say that there are these different influences, it's very, very interesting that we were talking about, again, going back to the Passover, I want to talk a little bit about the creation. The creation was started, and which we all know, because that's Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, the new year. That's when the creation started, Tishrei. But when the Jewish people came out of Egypt, Hashem said, and we're going to actually read it if you'll in the Torah in another week and a half, that before Passover we read Parshas Chodesh, which is in Bo, and Hashem says, this is going to be the beginning of the year, Nisan. So whenever you see in the Bible, you see, like for example, Aaron died, and they don't give the Hebrew months that we know at Nisan here. They give first months, all they'll call it first month, second month, third month. He died in the first day of the fifth month. Well, what month is it? Well, Tishrei. No, wait a minute. It's not Tishrei. You start counting the months with Nisan, which is the month the Jewish people left Egypt. And that's the fifth month, which would be Menachem Av. And so it's the fifth month, so they count the month from Nisan. What happened here? It's not just a matter of months here and months there, and we want to start the new calendar there. Tishrei is the form of creation. Now, just a little bit, just to tell you about the creation, it's very, very interesting, because there are 12 months, but there are 4 elements in the world. And that's very, very interesting. I mean, a lot of Kabbalah, say for your book, creation deals with and emphasizes this. And you'll see I'll say in a second, the earth, water, air, and fire, Aish. And it's very interesting, and then you're going to see it, because really, even though they're periodic table, and again, that people laugh it's a little too simplistic, but really, that by the time air is gases, earth is all different kind of minerals, really, you could say the whole creation in truth. If it's just like you want to subdivide it into periodic table, fine. You know, very specific, but if you want to make it into general categories, these 4 are right. And this from the book of creation, which was written by Abraham, like I said, very, very deep. That Abraham's, you know, your cute little stories in the Hebrew school, like I say, he was very, very intelligent, super intelligent, that without books, just by his own mind, understood there had to be one God creating and controlling the universe. And he was very, very learned. But just look at the first sentence in the Chumash, and we will underline these four different basic, the earth. Now the earth was unformed, not earth. So we have number one, the earth, the basis of creation. Everything's there. Was an unformed void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit is very interesting. Again, as I always emphasize, knowing the Hebrew helps you understand the deeper idea. Spirit in Hebrew, with the Chumash, ruach. Ruach is also wind. It goes together, your spirit. If you have a real spirit, you have a wind, you can say it into something. But again, with the Hebrew, it comes out more correct. That's the second, air. Hovered over the face of the waters. There's water. And Hashem said, let there be light. But light is, exactly H, but the sun is light. And what is it? Big ball of fire. Really, that's all it is. And just giving, it's not like a flashlight and electricity in the sky, it's fire. So right from the beginning, the first sense in the creation, or second sense, that you see all the four basic elements in the creation. It's all contained in there. The Bible is very, very condensed. It's very hidden, and that's why you need, and that's where the Kabbalah comes in to decipher all these deeper ideas that are, maybe you wouldn't even see it normally, but they're all contained in these different forces. And also, so therefore, these are the forces of the world that are controlled by Hashem, but again, that a person has the power through, even though there's astrology, and they talk about it in the Kabbalah, that these four elements, of course, there's 12 constellations, there's 4 elements, but each one has 3. So just giving you a few of someone who's under fire is enthusiastic, and these are the 3 couplets, the Aries, Leos, and Sagittarius, that is very, very interesting. And astrologers will say that also. It's like there's triplets of 3. So if you're in the middle of the 3, you're very stable. It's interesting. It's at the beginning there's different influences. Even astrology, people will say this, and again, it's not against Torah. I don't know about the horoscopes in the newspaper, but if a person really knew their astrology, to say that there's influence, and that's how we started to talk off, and saying it doesn't mean, they're full of baloney, they don't know what they're talking about. It's just not true. There are influences, and you can see your influences. Again, and just to conclude, and then we'll take some questions, is just that the bottom line is there influences astrology. Kabbalah will teach you how to go beyond the stars and be above it, and how to ultimately, people who are very, very, very learned and holy will manipulate, and that's where you see very Kabbalistic ideas to manipulate the nature, because once you know how it's formed and engineered and how it's put together, then you have the power really to, if you're a holy man and you understand the system and understand how everything works, then again, you don't have to be locked into nature. That's where you see many, many Hasidic stories. They don't tell you how he does it. A person can't have a baby, and then they have a baby, they're poor, and then they turn rich. And therefore, this is really the key behind all these stories, which they're not telling you, is just that through Kabbalistic influences, they are manipulating the nature in the world, because Kabbalah can take you above nature. You're not locked into, you are who you are, who you are, but can see that, how we can to change everything.
So is that how the Baal Shem Tov has his power of perception and all the stories about him, because he was drawing on the power?
Yes, just to say, even on that note, people would say, through innocent people, that we don't have that knowledge, but that's where prayer comes into, because God ultimately changes everything. He's in control of everything. So through prayer, that a person wants something. Of course, like we said, that's why I say the major story with Pharaoh and the Passover story, which is supposed to be reminded every day. Of course, we say it every year, that in a way, and we're not oppressing anybody, hopefully, like Pharaoh did, but the point really is that you say, well, this is the way it is. This is a natural way. And there's many stories, like I told you with Abraham, many stories with Joseph, getting into that you say, well, you're a loser, you're on the underside, and as we're told, no, God can change everything. So either people go to the Baal Shem Tov, they go to the Rebbe, they have things changed, or, you can do it yourself really through prayer, ask for God to change things and have that pure faith that, God could do anything and manipulate the world. Very good.
That space and time and travel of the Baal Shem Tov and other very religious men, how they were above space and time, you could cover distances and do things that weren't, what about that?
You know what? That doesn't necessarily have to be miracles, you should know, because once, it's just really, like I say, if you'd say 150 years ago, I can fly to Israel in 8 hours, and, on and on, just going on to all the scientific devices without magic or scientific, you would say, they would say you're playing with magic. Incredible. Especially with the computers today, and I can talk to Israel and it cost me 2 cents or whatever, and pick up a phone and talk to my cousin in Israel. They'd say, 150 years ago, you're crazy. It's wild, and we just know it's science. So saying that, Kabbalah has that sense of if you know how the system works, you don't even have to look for miracles. You could just use it out, just like scientists. They know how to manipulate nature, and they can make computers, and they can make airplanes fly. They're not magicians, they're scientists, because they work the system, so to speak, the forces of nature. So if a person goes beyond that, and these people were beyond it, way ahead of their times, that they can go through using powers of nature, that they can influence things. And to us, it's a miracle. Just like I say, if a computer would be a miracle to someone 100 years ago, flying 100 years ago, 150 years ago would be a total miracle to them. But since they knew these different forces, that's what I'm saying, they're masters of these, of the influences. Baal Shem Tov means the master of the good name. So you understand, it's not just natural. He knew how Hashem's names engineered everything in order to influence the world. So it's like they know the system, so to speak. So again, like a scientist, once you know the system, how things work, then it's not just really even a miracle. To our perception, it's a miracle. But to them, it's just they knew how to work everything. At certain times it is a miracle. It's like they know that certain things are impossible, and they just say, well, Hashem can interfere and do it anyway. It's a major idea. Any other nice questions? Any other different thoughts about this? All right, without further ado, then I guess we'll conclude, and we'll have everybody's so we talk about Purim, we still have some Hamantashen over here. So you can have the Hamantashen. All right, thank you very much.